Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Red Pill Religion podcast. This is another of our videos that's not exactly in the escaping atheism vein. I have not figured out where we would categorize Dr. Turley in the interview series we've done, but I want to remind everybody that what we do here on Red Pill Religion is a secular effort. This is not a Christian apologetics show. This is not a political show either. It's not what we do on this channel or on our website. Red Pill Religion is dedicated to the proposition that belief in the supernatural and the transcendent is 1, totally normal, 2, completely healthy, 3, quite rational, 4, quite evidence-based. And we welcome people of all religions here who are non-hostile and who are basically friendly to Western civilization and the kind of world most of us want to live in. We interview Jews, we interview Hindus, we interview Muslims, we interview Christians, we interview non-religious spiritual people. Everybody's welcome here as long as you're not hostile to people of faith. Please give us a like, please give us a subscribe, please give us your spiritual and financial support. Find us on redpillreligion.com. Now, today joining me is Dr. Steve Turley. What I'm showing you here from Dr. Turley is his YouTube page, where he's been running since early November of last year, so a little bit over a year. He's also a number of books, and we're going to be talking about that. Say hi to the nice folks, if you would, Dr. Steve.
Oh, hello, everyone. It's great to be with you. Great to be with you too, Max.
Thank you, Dr. Steve. I appreciate it. Now, I do encourage everybody to go and subscribe to his channel. I will give you a warning that his channel is somewhat political. Definitely you'd call him conservative, but not of the rabid, raving, I'm a Republican first and whatever else I'm doing is next, and Donald Trump is the God, Emperor, King. I don't think that's you at all, is it, Dr. Steve?
I don't know. Maybe I'll get more subscribers that way, huh? No, that's boring. We'll let other people do that.
What he mostly does is election analyses and cultural analyses. And one of the things that surprised me at first, although now that I've been looking at it over the last year or two, doesn't surprise me that much more, is the returning rise of not just nationalist sentiment, which everybody's talking about, whether they're terrified of it or cheering for it, the return of nationalism. But what's not still being talked about very much, which should be, which is the rise of religion as a major force in not just American politics, but world politics. And that's, in fact, this is the one I wanted to ask him about most of all, because the first time he said it, I said, huh? Because I've been watching his videos a while. And he said, we're now in, not just approaching, we're already in the post-secular age. Post-secular. Steve Turley, defend that, sir.
Yeah. Well, of course, the issue comes down to definition. What do we mean by that? Most scholars would define the post-secular very simply as the return of religion. And even post-secular scholars have noticed that can be a bit problematic. Some would argue religion never went anywhere. It may have sought refuge underground. It may have been pushed there by secular elites, but it was always there. Sort of heartland piety, we might say. So what I tend to do is I tend to try to give a little more meat to the bones there, and I like to say that post-secularism involves a nexus of interrelated dynamics, and they're basically three: the rise of nationalism, the rise of populism, and the rise of what, it's a fancy word, but it's an easy concept, re-traditionalization, or the rise of traditionalism in general. And what we're finding is that the intersection between these three dynamics can be found all over the world right now, in many respects as a blowback against the anti-cultural processes of globalization and its secular aristocracy. So it's not like it just happened to pop up. Religion just sort of made a arbitrary comeback, as it were. religion is being used by populations today, and I mean used in a neutral way, not in a exploitive way. It's being used as a mechanism of resistance against what is seen as culturally hollowing out processes of secularism and globalization. And this is being felt in Japan, all the way to Russia, all the way to the United States, Europe, you name it, Turkey, Middle East. And so the idea that we're living just in a solely hard secularist society simply can't make sense, I think, of the mass resurgence of religiosity that we see throughout the globe.
And that's interesting too. I'm showing some of the videos, you know, the basic video list, and you're going to find that on Turley Talks here, his channel, America's not even the focus of at least half the videos. We got Brazil, we got Poland, we got Austria, we hear about Hungary, we hear about Russia, we hear about all these countries. And you know, you're seeing the rise of nationalism and anti-globalist forces. And here's the thing, I mean, it's hard for me when you look at secularism. We're both near the age of 50. Let's put it to you that way. And I remember when secular was a word that meant, well, basically it was a way for religious people to set aside their differences and, you know, come together on where they were in common. And it seems very much to me over the last 10 years, especially, maybe it's been a slower creep than that, but secular really did eventually come to mean atheist, to the point where religious people are not even welcome in the secular discussion. That's one of the reasons this project exists. That's one of the reasons I started Escaping Atheism and the Red Pill Religion Project, because I realized that even in my own personal life, things I had encountered, and then things I began hearing from other religious people, not all of them Christian, but obviously a lot of Christians, that, yeah, the secular order hates us and wants us to shut up just because we believe in God, or might want to do something like pray. And that seems to have become what secularism means. In fact, we seem to have actually just surrendered and decided that secular means atheist, haven't we?
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of it comes with just even the way the term religion got redefined. If you're familiar with the political theologian Bill Kavanaugh and the work he has done on this, it's very good. He points out that the term religio, the Latin term, simply meant social obligation. It's a re-legare. Pardon me?
Oh, really? It just meant secular, it meant social obligation?
But yeah, at the beginning of the use of the term, re-legare meant to retie or rebind one's social obligations. So if you got a nice, you know, when you were a young boy and you got a nice birthday card with a little money in it from your grandmother, and your parents say, now you know what you need to do. And of course, we needed to call grandma and thank her. That's religion. That's fulfilling your social obligations. Now, back in the day, that also involved paying your respects to Zeus or Apollos or Dionysius. You had to honor not just your elders, or not just your guild, not just your city-state leaders. You had to, or emperor. You had to honor your gods as well. But you're dealing with a time where there wasn't a separation between say divine life and human life. They intersected in the polis, or the city state. Now you have Saint Augustine coming up with the term of true religion and false religion. True religion is the fulfillment of our true obligations, the ultimate being to the true and the living God. False religion, of course, is with the pagans and the false gods. But religion had this sense for over 1,000 years of fulfilling one's social obligations. And even when we get into the idea of the secular at this point, again, it's only to make distinctions, particularly in the medieval period, of one's vocations. So if you're in the priesthood, then you have a religious vocation. If you're in the secular world, as it were, then you have more professional, banking, what have you, vocations. When you get into the 18th century, that's when you begin to see, via Voltaire and others in the Enlightenment, you begin to see this redefinition of religion. Religion is no longer your social obligations ultimately to divine life. Now, religion is something that you believe but you can't know. And this is because they redefine knowledge. Knowledge was something now that was defined solely in terms of scientific processes. And so now religion is just a matter of personal persuasion and opinion and nothing more. That's key. And then it was eventually kicked out of the universities, which is odd because most of the universities were under the auspices of the church. The 114 of the first 118 colleges founded in the United States were founded by either the church or church-affiliated organizations.
All the universities in Europe, all of them that are currently still operating, were started either by the Catholic Church, or after the Reformation came along, you have them founded by, some Lutherans, some Episcopalians, right, and so on. The whole education system is a Christian scheme.
Exactly. Absolutely. Inescapably so. Even the curriculum that we still have now revolves around, when all said and done, word and number. Trivium and quadrivium, which is the 7 liberal arts. So what you now have is you have this notion that the secular is knowledge, it is science, it is technological advancement, it is civilization, and religion is this backwards, privatized personal persuasion that believes in the reality of things that we cannot possibly know, and therefore does not belong in the public square in any way, shape, or form. So I think that's what we've seen. Now, of course, my argument is that that's basically dead, and we are beginning to see a return of religion in the public square.
Well, we've seen, we've seen it go even further, and there's a certain hardcore set, militant, but common, especially even in the low culture, that religion is so dangerous you don't want it near, anywhere near. And they've redefined religion. In some cases, they've redefined it so much as just pretty much definitionally irrational,
right,
and possibly dangerous. That's reflective of actually Stalinist campaigns and things like the League of the Militant Godless. One of the reasons I got interested in all this is that if you look at the new atheist books that came out by Hitchens and Harris and Dawkins and those, a lot of it is ripped straight out of the League of the Militant Godless and from other Marxist stuff, and it's made its way into the low culture. Yet despite that, interest is rising. I'm seeing interest in it, not just in the United States, but I mean in Europe, in the UK, in Canada. I'm seeing signs of it in quite a few places. The press isn't covering it that way exactly, but it appears to me that more and more religious people are just waking up and saying we've got to do something politically and culturally. I had no idea. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know how bad it had gotten out there until I started trying engaging people about it. Hostility to religion, I've never seen it higher in the United States.
The moment you've privatized faith the way that a secular society demands us to do, they say you can believe whatever you want, but you have to keep it private. It can't be brought in the public sphere. I think we intuitively sense that that's fundamentally wrong, precisely because it robs our faith of its truth. And it robs our faith of its truth because truth is public in nature. It's not private. We have to remember that the public sphere is the objective sphere. It's the sphere of moral obligation. It's the sphere where we're all held accountable. The police officer pulls me over for speeding, and he comes up to the window. I say, no, thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate it. Bye-bye. No, thank you. You know, I hope he's in a good mood. He can explain to me, this isn't a matter of my personal choice here. This isn't private. This is public. Mm-hmm. We're all obliged to conform to the public sphere of life. And when you've privatized faith, what you have done is you have removed faith from the very social sphere by which its truth claims make sense. I can say it is true that the First Amendment is a constitutional principle. But if I privatized my faith, I cannot say it is true that Jesus Christ is risen. No, that's a personal opinion. It's like saying pistachio ice cream is my favorite, or what's your favorite color, right? Kind of thing. It has no objective truth to it at all. Same with our moral claims. If we try to say that a certain vision of sexuality is true and good and another vision is immoral, we can't do that any more than I can say to you, Max, hey, when we're in the mall and you go to eat at Salad Works, that's immoral. No, you have to go over to I don't know, Sukihana. Sukihana is where it's at, man. That's where eternal life is found. And you'd look at me like, what does morality have to do with it? This is a matter of personal choice, nothing more. That's what's happened. When the church gets moved from the town green to next door to the dry cleaners and pizzerias, it's lost its ability to proclaim truth. That's just the sad social fact. People have felt that, and they now want to go back onto the town green. And that, I think, is the blowback that we're seeing all over the world.
I think it may take a different form, though. When we had the rise of the religious right back in the 70s and 80s, or what was called the religious right in the United States, it was primarily evangelical, and it was primarily, I'll just be honest, because I remember it, and I was always kind of put off by it. More populist. It seemed more political than religious. Let me put it to you that way. And what I'm seeing now, I'm not sure we're going to see a rise again of something like the Christian Coalition, but maybe just more a return to the neighborhood church and that sort of thing. I mean, I guess I'm being a little inchoate here, but it doesn't have, what I'm seeing of the rise of religiosity in our politics doesn't quite look like the Ralph Reed era of the religious right to me. What do you think?
Yeah, it is different. It is different. What is interesting is it's actually gone more international. So you're starting to see coalitions that have been called the Baptist Burkas or the Burka Baptists at the United Nations. And this really happened under the Bush administration, George W., where focus on the family and Concerned Women for America ended up creating these international branches through the United Nations. And they started working with other nations that were very concerned about the secular liberalism and progressive moral projects that were being passed by some of the nations there. Unfortunately, all happened to be Western. And that just continued. So now you're beginning to see really this very large worldwide coalition being built, largely through the impetus of Patriarch Kirill of Russia, that is standing up for traditionalist morality as the only basis for a flourishing civilization. Homosexuality, abortion, these sort of things, transgenderism, Patriarch Kirill has been articulating in a very beautiful way as these are inherently anti-civilizational. These are inherently destructive of human society. No matter what you do, you're not going to gay marriage yourself into fertility, and you're not going to abort yourself into prosperity. Sorry, it just ain't going to happen. And what we're finding is that's actually what is happening. We're finding that the secular population is beginning to shrink demographically, precisely because in many respects, it's not having children. And to the extent that it does have children, a very significant percentage of them, some statistics have 1 in 3, are being aborted. And so Christians, conservative Christians, are having children at the rate of 2-3 children per couple, or so 2.5, 3.5 per couple, which is a 30% fertility advantage over non-Christians, the secularists. And that 30% fertility advantage, just over one generation, if they're both equal in terms of the percentage of population, Christian and secular, just in one generation, they would shift from a 60% Christian, 40% secular. In 2 generations, it would be 75-25%. It is that significant, and I think that's what we're seeing. So I think you're right. I think what we're seeing is sort of a return to the things that matter. We're seeing a return to localism. We're seeing a return to the church. Rodney Stark just published his book, The Triumph of Faith, and he made a magnificent claim. He backs it up with the stats. It's actually brilliant. He said, there's never been a time when America's had more people as committed members of conservative churches in the last 100, 200 years than we have right now. And so you've got all that going on, and you've got this more global coalition of Christians coming together, conservative Christians coming together, Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, defending a traditional morality as the basis for a vibrant and prosperous civilization.
Now, you hit one of the hot button issues, and I just admit, I mean, even some of my fellow Christians give me a little grief for it, but I mean, I've always had gay friends, I mean, since high school, right? And I've never thought it was okay to persecute them or hurt them or put them in jail. And actually, I used to believe that it was Christians that offended, that oppressed homosexuals, gays, whatever terminology you use. What I find, and as I search my memory and I research the world, it's actually usually secular governments that start out very kind to gays and those sorts of folks, and then they turn on them, and even often kill them. Whereas in Christian civilization, the reality I've actually seen has always been a broad tolerance as long as you don't put that stuff in my face.
Right.
That's what I've remembered my whole life, and I think that's actually still what you'll find is most prevalent in Christian nations. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, but it's certainly what I've seen. There seems to be this terror that if Christians get in charge, we're going to start murdering the gays.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, look, right. The fact is that the Greeks were as accepting of homosexuality as you can read Plato's Symposium. The whole practice of what's called synusia, where you have a 30, 40-year-old man sexually mentoring a young boy, not quite prepubescent, but say 12-year-old boy or so. That was a commonly accepted practice back in the day, but they never equated it with marriage. They never even dreamed of equating it with marriage.
No.
Marriage is the bedrock of civilization. And as a bedrock of human civilization, it has to have the capacity to continue and perpetuate that civilization through procreation. So you can have very, very accepting societies that still turn around and say, but that's not marriage. Right? That's not a family. They're not the same. So what you're seeing, for example, in Russia and in Eastern Europe and Central Europe, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and the like, what you tend to be seeing now is laws that absolutely forbid marriage even remotely being thought of in this way. They don't even recognize, like, for example, in Poland, they don't even recognize civil unions. They said, no, that's the last step before it gets turned into marriage eventually. We know how this progressivism works through incrementalism. No, we're not doing that. But we're also not going to throw two men who decide to live together in their own private lives. We're not going to throw them into prison either. You could do that if that's what you choose to do. You have free will. We're not going to superimpose anything upon that free will, but we're also not going to redefine just logically and traditionally the foundation of human civilization.
No, in fact, there are plenty of people who are of alternative lifestyles, whether you use the word gay or even something else like poly and all that other stuff that's gotten popular. There's plenty of individuals who are even involved in those communities of that lifestyle who will say, yes, but we have to protect traditional marriage anyway,
Right.
because it's important. It's what keeps civilization going. And,
right.
And so the demonization of somebody who says they're a traditionalist needs to stop. Most traditionalists are not the crazy people that they're thought to be. Gladius Fortis in the comments here is saying, in the live chat, is saying, Russia isn't as conservative as people think. Abortion and alcohol-related deaths are atrocious. I don't think Dr. Turley said it just turned into a Christian haven. I suspect what you're going to find, what has been has been true of Christian civilization for a long time, which is that in the public square, certain things are frowned on, but if you don't drag your vices into public view, nobody cares that much. Which call that making a case for hypocrisy, but okay, hypocrisy it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love how you answer that. Humans never fail to disappoint. Human society has always exemplified sin. But it is also, by the grace of God, exemplified the remnants of paradise that have been fully returned in Christ. I would recommend for this person, I just happen to have it right there, a book by the fellow named John Burgess called Holy Rus, The Rebirth of Orthodoxy in the New Russia. I have a video actually on this coming out, little book review here, and he captures the dialectic, I think, quite well. He spent a number of years in Russia, and he recognizes that. Yeah,
who's the author of that? What's
it's
name and title?
John P. Burgess. I don't know if you can see it there. John P. Burgess, okay. Burgess. He's I believe he is a history professor at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. And so he's a Protestant. In love with Russia, the new Russia. It's the post-Soviet Russia. And shows that, yes, you will go down the street in St. Petersburg, and you will see walking in the streets monks and priests, and you'll hear the bells of churches, and you'll see people selling crosses from a little street market vendor. So you'll get propositioned by a prostitute.
Which is Christian civilization, actually.
Welcome, right? Welcome to 4th century Alexandria. You know, you will see a church on one corner, and you will see a striptease on the other corner. Christian society has never been the New Jerusalem in all its fullness. It's got its warts, problems. You've got no shortage of finger pointing for hypocrisy. It has its grace, it has its sacraments, it has its beauty, and the like. And so what you have to do is, and what I try to do, is to find an explanation and an understanding of how those two intersect in any given social order.
I believe here's the book on Amazon, John P. Burgess, Holy Rus. I would point out that St. Augustine of Hippo, what was that, 4th century? I can't remember, but even he was the one who said, you know, no, I mean, you have to have whorehouses, and you just gotta go put that over in a place where it's out of the mainstream kind of thing. The idea that Christian civilization is innately just a Puritan. In fact, the Catholic Church condemns Puritanism.
It's the wheat and the tares. That's the state it's going to be in. But what do? We who have confessed Christ, who are baptized, who are who are being sanctified through the sacramental life of the church. We're called to be that light and that witness to that prostitute and to the ambiguous societies in which we live. But I'm an absolute proponent of a society, that kind of ambiguity, absolute proponent, unapologetic proponent. I want to see churches on every corner, across from every brothel.
You can a church across from every brothel. That's actually a good idea. For a few, I come to think of it, that's actually a good idea. Those people got to have somewhere to go when they finally realize their lives suck.
That's right.
I've known me some people in that life. Their lives invariably suck. Even the ones who claim they're happy, they're not. But the Christian way has always been: you don't force people. You don't force people into church with a gun. They're either going to come or they're not. That's part of the way. So I would urge people who are terrified of the rise of the religious conservatives to get a grip a little bit, get to know a few. Most aren't that crazy. Most know they can't make you be good. They can't make you be good. We could just kind of minimize and say, look, if you're going to do certain things, try to have some respect. So I'm curious. We're running out. We've only got a few minutes left here, maybe about 10 minutes. But you've got a few books out, and I want to make sure. I should have gotten them up in the beginning. You have 4 books out that I'm aware of. You have Movies and the Moral Imagination. You have Classical versus Modern Education. These are all by Stephen R. Turley, but you'll find them on at your local bookseller, not necessarily Amazon, but you can go there. Stressed Out and Healthcare Sharing. Now, what's interesting here is Steve, is that you've got 4 books and none of them is about what we've been talking about.
That's right. We do have on the website, Turley Talks website, we do have a free ebook, President Trump and Our Post-Secular Future. And that one is going to be very much of everything we're talking about. But yeah, these books that I just put out for the Christmas season are more really deeply cultural books. So that's the book page there. You'll see, and that's where we get into truth, goodness, and beauty, classical education. We get into prayer, we get into literature there. What I tend to do is I tend to approach things from 2 vantage points, top down and bottom up. So we're talking about sort of the recovery of Christian civilization. It's happening from the vantage point of the current events, politics perspective. That's what we do primarily with the YouTube channel. But that's top down. But it's also bottom up, very much like what you said, just a good old-fashioned localism of people celebrating their culture, their families, their literature, their music, their education, and the like. That's what makes us a people. That's what makes us human. And so it's both top down, like we've been talking about, but it's also bottom up as well, from the vantage point of a very enriching culture.
Now, I will warn people to go to your channel let me put it to you this way: you'll find a rather friendly to Donald Trump spin. So I mean, if you're one of those people who can't stand Trump, don't lose your mind. But what I would tell people is go read the channel. It's not about Donald Trump. It's about the forces that made Donald Trump real. So even if you can't stand Donald Trump or what he stands for, you are going to learn a lot from Dr. Turley, because I believe he's correct in his central thesis. Donald Trump wasn't a fluke, and while he may be brilliant in some way or not, I don't want to get into an argument with people who don't like Trump and say he's dumb. The bottom line, Donald Trump is not the entire reason Donald Trump won. In fact, he's probably the least important. He needed to be able to have the skill set that he did to get elected, but he's not the reason he won. I really don't believe that. I think it's something bigger, and it's not just bigger in the United States.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Max. Yeah, I think like, just as it's nice that we're kind of coming full circle there. A post-secular society is a society that's characterized by the intersection of nationalism, populism, and traditionalism. Think of the 3 things that in that election, right? So while all the other candidates for the Republican nomination were lecturing us on globalism, Marco Rubio was basically telling us we needed to, get out of manufacturing and go back to college and, learn to get into this 21st century digital economy and the like. While they were all very much enamored with sort of your typical kind of neocon paradigm, it was Trump who brought back Pat Buchanan and said, no, what we really need is we need a wall protecting our borders. We need to bring back manufacturing and industry from China and the global south. And we need to restore our Christian traditions. Remember, we're gonna say Merry Christmas. We're gonna need to restore our Christian traditions to protect us from the kind of hedonism that draws us over to this globalistic economy that ends up flushing all of our jobs down the drain to the global south. He tapped into processes that were much bigger than him. And I do think he had the brilliance to see that, along with Steve Bannon. I think Steve Bannon is probably the single most significant political figure out there, political theorist out there. But this was going on. I mean, Trump was preceded by the Brexit. And one of the ways I like explaining a post-secular society is what I call the Brexit blowback that we're seeing all over the world.
Yeah, I could see that even when it was going on, that Nigel Farage was riding a very similar wave that Trump was obviously riding to me. And it was obvious to me, even just looking, it was bigger. I mean, one of your favorite videos, and I almost want you to do more on it, is this one on the rise of Hindu nationalism in India.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
It's one of the things that I've tried to get this across. We have actual science on this, people, and being spiritual, and by being spiritual, I don't mean good feeling. I mean being spiritual is in believing there are things that operate outside the forces of physics, believing there are real things that aren't subject to, well, like I said, the laws of physics. They're not subject to gravity. They're real things. They're spiritual forces. And it's abnormal for people not to believe in the spiritual. It's literally abnormal for them not to. So even if you don't have a Christian society, I believe you're eventually going to wind up with a Muslim society, a Hindu society, a Shinto society, something. I mean, didn't you even tell me, this is what amazed me. You told me that most business, or not me, but it was in one of your videos, that in Japan, of all places, which is all displayed as very secular, supposedly, like Shinto priests and Shinto rituals and shrines and that are everywhere, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. No, I have firsthand knowledge of Japan. My wife's from Japan. I've visited Japan several times. The notion that Japan is secular makes a mockery of the term secularism. The entire skyline of Tokyo is comprised of high-rise buildings. Every single one of them has been built on ground blessed by a Shinto priest. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to get a house built, or even just, I mean, you want to get a dog house built in anywhere in Japan, it's not going to happen until a Shinto priest first comes and blesses the land. It is, and then that doesn't even bring in Buddhism. Buddhism's the whole ritual of how one dies in Japan. One dies through the process of adopting the practices of Buddhism. So Shintoism is for the celebration of life, rites of passage, birthdays, marriages, job promotion, the like. Buddhism is about death. It's about going into sort of the next life, into the kami-sama, as they would call it. So you got it. And you have Shinto nationalism now at the highest levels.
Oh, really?
Of the government. Oh yeah, absolutely. Abe's government. Abe just won re-election just a few weeks ago. It really flew under the radar. I didn't even do a video on it. I really should have. But and he ran on this thoroughgoing nationalist, populist sort of campaign. It was almost Trump-like. And of course, he loves to use all the pomp and the circumstance of imperial Shintoism in all of the stagecraft and the political craft that he was dealing with. There is no way around it. Rodney Stark has said this in his latest book, The Triumph of Faith. We are in a period of religious awakening, perhaps like we've never seen before. Again, it's not clean. I know, Max, and your listener, you are dealing with you're right on the front lines of the abyss with secularism and atheism and the like. I know that. I respect that. You have a much better backbone than I. But the beauty of it, know that your work is not in vain. I mean, there is something that's going on, the likes of which we have never seen.
Human beings need the spiritual. And just to sermonize a little, even though I am a Christian and I believe in the Christian message, and I would love to see everybody become Orthodox Catholic Christians, I would love to see that happen. But knowing that it's not going to happen, well, not very likely, we could pray for it. But just knowing, I see the difference in both the culture and in day-to-day interaction. Spiritual people, I think what it comes down to with spiritual people, even if they are just Buddhists, well, not just Buddhists, even if they're Buddhists, I just want to make, but when I say Buddhist, I mean like the Japanese kind he's talking about, not the secular Buddhism that's it actually comes from the Chinese government, but whatever, that gets passed out. It's basically atheist Buddhism, and it's fake Buddhism. Real Buddhism believes in the supernatural. It believes in gods or spirits. It tends to believe there's at least one ultimate source driving everything. It's not compatible with the Christian religion exactly, but it is in the sense that spiritual people are spiritual and they know reality goes beyond the four forces of physics, or they call them the three, and that it's normal. And if you look at statistics on people who are atheists, not only are they unusual, but they almost may be biologically unusual, like because most people have a strong spiritual sense. And I've even argued that from an evolutionary perspective, if you could object to evolution, but even from an evolutionary perspective, let's just go ahead and accept that evolution is real. We're not going to argue about it. We're going to accept that it's a real, we evolved out of the primordial slime and all that. We clearly evolved a need for the spiritual, and we get sick if we don't have it. It's very observable in humans. Atheists actually live less long and have more mental problems and more mental health problems, and they have fewer kids, which means from a Darwinian perspective, atheism ain't good for you. It's just not. You're better off being a Shintoist than that, even just from a material point of view. All right, enough ranting. Enough ranting. I think we've hit our time limit here, Dr. Steve. Is there any closing thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Oh, actually, I was going to just follow up with what you just said. The cultural anthropologist Roy Rappaport at the University of Michigan passed away around 1997, devoted his entire life to the thesis that the human species had evolved through ritual and religion. Ritual and religion are intrinsic to any kind of evolutionary development of the human person, and we chuck them at our own peril.
That makes perfect sense. All right, everybody, please make sure to go check out Dr. Steve Turley and his webpage, or his YouTube channel, Dr. Steve Turley. I think he's calling it Turley Talks. You can also go to turleytalks.com and find his books. And beyond that, we'll just continue doing what we're doing. We've got some upcoming guests next week that I've got to keep a secret, but I'm expecting next week to be pretty exciting. I want you to all go ahead and otherwise please give us a like. Please give us a subscribe. Please tell your friends and enemies all about us here on Red Pill Religion and our Escaping Atheism project. We could use your spiritual as well as financial support, and God bless everybody.